The VapePassion Show, episode 42. Hey, welcome back to the VapePassion Show. This is episode 42, and I'm recording this on Sunday, November 13th. So I'm going to start with my usual vape and beer pairing. So this week I have brown ale from Upslope Brewing Company. It's a roasted malty aromatic ale, according to the can. And it's 6.7 alcohol, so a little stronger than your average beer. So brown ales, they tend to pair well with desserts like lemon puddings or chocolates. The closest thing I have to either of those is Cuckoo Puffs from High Class Vape Company. So that's what I'm using here. I just published my review of Cuckoo Puffs on my YouTube channel if you want to check it out. But it's a mix of hot cocoa, chocolate milk, and vanilla custard. It's not amazing, but it's pretty good. So I've already got it loaded up. Got my beer here. Good thick creaminess. Oh yeah, that's a pretty good pairing actually. That's good. That brown ale is really good too. So like most of you know, most reviewers use affiliate links to earn a little extra cash from referrals. I'm no different. I use affiliate links and I'm totally transparent about it. I don't make much from it, and I doubt any other reviewers do either. But it's a little extra income, no matter how small, it helps. In case you're wondering, I've made something like $90 this year, so yeah, not much. Paying for hosting for my podcast and hosting for my website, it isn't exactly cheap, and it costs far more than I make in affiliate commissions, so I'm trying to figure out ways to keep everything going, which is why I created a vendors page on my website. I'm an affiliate of all the vendors listed on that page, and I'm not claiming that any vendor on my list is a good vendor, although I have purchased from a bunch of those people, and I don't see any reason why you shouldn't trust them. But if I ever find out that one of those vendors isn't trustworthy, I'm absolutely going to remove them from that page. So if you see a vendor on that list that I should remove, let me know. Basically, I put this list together so that if any of you listening or watching right now have a favorite vendor, I just wanted to ask that you see if they're on my list, and if they are, buy from my link. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but the vendor will give me a small cut of the purchase. Most of them do something like 5 to 10%, so it's not much, but it helps. So yeah, if you want to help me out, go to vapepassion.com/vendors and see if your favorite vendor is listed. And if your vendor of choice isn't, let me know and I'll see if they have an affiliate program. So thanks in advance to any of you supporting the show. Okay, and then something really quick that I wanted to mention, halocigs.com. They're a pretty well-known e-juice company here in the US, and they're a company doing a lot to try to protect our rights to vape through lawsuits against the FDA. Well, now they're doing something to honor those who serve. On Veterans Day, they announced that they're now providing veterans, first responders, and active military members with a 10% site-wide discount. This is permanent moving forward, not just for Veterans Day. They're using ID.me to identify service members, so if that's you and you like Halo's e-juices, go sign up and get your discount. That's pretty cool of them to do. Okay, and so the big news of the week is that, as everyone knows by now, Trump will be the 45th president of the United States, and now we can hypothesize what his presidency might mean for vaping. Let me start by saying that I'm by no means an expert in politics, but I just wanted to share my own thoughts on what a Trump presidency might mean for vaping. I'm trying to look at this from every angle, not just the positives, so you might disagree with me whether you voted for Trump or not. So first, let's talk about having a Republican president, House, and Senate. Donald Trump is a Republican, and now the House and Senate are also controlled by Republicans. A Republican House and Senate is likely to pass Trump's initiatives pretty easily, as well as other Republican-focused initiatives beyond what Trump focuses on. Republicans tend to lean towards fewer regulations and less taxes, both of which are good for the vape industry. But our government currently sees vaping as bad as smoking. If these chambers decide to stick with our country's general thoughts of vaping being as bad as smoking, that would be bad. Trump has also been eyeing billionaires and businessmen for his cabinet, which could be a good thing for vaping, unless one of those people are pro-tobacco. Okay, so now let's move into science denial. So Trump is known for denying science. He denies climate change, and he believes there's a link between vaccines and autism, despite science proving global warming and discrediting autism caused by vaccines. You might believe he's correct, and even if he is, he's denying science. This could be a good thing for vapors. Even if doctors here in the States agree that vaping is as bad as smoking, Trump might believe differently, or he might disagree with the research that shows vaping is safer than smoking. Although science deniers, they tend to side with the minority, which would be good for us. A lot of the people that Trump is considering for his cabinet are also science deniers. For example, Ben Carson, who believes that the pyramids of Egypt were used to store grain rather than being used as tombs. Anyway, this could be good for the vape industry. All right, let's talk regulations. So one of Trump's frequent promises while running for president is that he would eliminate all needless and job-killing regulations now on the books. He never went into specifics about what regulations these might be, but he did say he would make 3 key actions. He would, 1, put a freeze on any new federal regulation proposals, 2, require regulators to rank regulations and cut the least important ones, and 3, replace the leaders of some federal agencies. Okay, so a freeze on new federal regulations. It's obvious to us as vapers that the FDA regulations is costing jobs and forcing vape shops out of business. But when Trump talked about job-killing regulations, he mainly talked about regulations put in place by the Environmental Protection Agency and regulations against banks. These are big endeavors, and I worry that the FDA's regulations against vaping is too small for him to worry about. Trump also mentioned that he wants to focus on regulations that don't improve public safety. Unfortunately, most of the general public mistakenly believes that vaping is the same as smoking. So who knows which side he'll take on it. Now on to his statement of ranking regulations and cutting the least important ones. This could be good or bad. We as vapers feel that FDA's tobacco deeming regulations on e-cigs is not an important regulation and it should be cut. The problem though is that most of our country's medical experts and health organizations believe that vaping is no better than smoking. So will Trump side with the minority or the majority on this one? Okay, and lastly, replacing the leaders of some federal agencies. This could be a big win for the vaping industry because the current FDA commissioner, Robert Califf, is not likely to remain in his position. Robert Califf, he has a history of being anti-vaping and has been noted to have controversial ties with pharmaceutical companies who make nicotine replacement products, which may have heavily influenced the regulations against electronic cigarettes. And only once in history has a commissioner remained in their position after a new president took office, and people are already saying that Califf is expected to submit his resignation. So replacing Dr. Califf could be great for the vaping industry, or we might get someone just like him. But whoever we get probably won't be any worse. And another position we'd like to see changed is the director of the FDA's Center for Tobacco Products, which is filled by Mitch Zeller. And Zeller, he's played a large role in passing of the deeming regulations that classify electronic cigarettes as tobacco products. Like Califf, it's hard to say if the FDA's views would change on vaping with someone else in charge, but it could be a change for the better, which is all we can hope for. Another thing to consider is that some people believe that the FDA might be immediately defunded and will lack the resources to further regulate or police their own regulations, which would include vaping regulations. So there are some thoughts on the regulations our industry faces and how we might benefit from the Trump presidency. Overall, it looks favorable for us. All right, now let's talk about Trump's vice president, Mike Pence. So Pence, he practically banned vaping in Indiana when he signed House Bill 1432 as governor of that state. This bill didn't allow the sale of e-liquid that was not approved by the state's Alcohol Tobacco Commission. It also required that all e-juice sold in the state needed to work with only one independent security firm, who had the choice to pick who they wanted to work with. That security firm only chose 7 manufacturers. These strict regulations and the lack of choice to consumers resulted in many vape businesses in Indiana being forced to close. Pence has also written an op-ed piece in 2000 that said that smoking doesn't kill people. Although what many people don't mention is that Pence had more to say on that. He further stated that his beliefs come from the fact that 2 out of 3 smokers do not die from smoking. He also said that smoking is not healthy and that smokers should quit. His stance didn't appear to be in support of smoking, but rather against the government's interference in preventing adults to smoke if they wanted to. But to say that smoking doesn't kill people is a strange thing to say. While in Indiana, he also cut funding for tobacco prevention and cessation. The state now has the 7th highest smoking rate in the nation and nearly double the national average of pregnant women smokers. And they also have the lowest tobacco taxes of any state. So he created very high taxes for electronic cigarettes and lowered taxes for combustible tobacco. And many people believe that Big Tobacco has their hands deep in his pockets. And reports say that he has received more than $100,000 from the tobacco industry during his political career. Now, as you're probably aware, Big Tobacco, they're major players in the electronic cigarette market now. So we have to ask ourselves, why would they want to regulate vaping? Well, the tobacco industry, they make a lot more money from combustible tobacco than they do from electronic cigarettes. And also, the tobacco industry focuses mainly on cig-alikes and closed tank systems. So regulations against refillable tank systems, e-juices, and advanced devices would definitely be more profitable for them, while also killing off their smaller competition. So if they can influence regulations in these areas, they probably will, and Pence might be willing to do Big Tobacco's bidding. In my view, Pence doesn't look good for vaping, but many people also believe that Pence will no longer play a major role as vice president, in the belief that vice presidents are basically there for this whole reason of taking over if something happens to the president. But while it might seem like the VP does nothing since we never see them in the news, they actually do a lot of things. Vice President Biden, for example, was in charge of overseeing the Economic Stimulus Act. He oversaw the U.S. policy toward Iraq, and he regularly negotiated with Republicans to implement legislation. Things like the tax relief, the Budget Control Act, and the Job Creation Act. So it might seem like Biden wasn't doing anything, but he was. And Pence will too. So is Pence good for vaping? It doesn't look like it. All right, let's talk potential price increases. So one of the things that Trump stated while he was on the campaign trail was that he wanted to double the tariffs on products from China. A large amount of products that we use in the United States come from China, such as electronics. We also get a lot of other things from China, like textiles, metals, plastics, rubber, and chemical products. Many of these things are components used in vape products. I've heard arguments that these tariffs would either force people to buy American-made products or force American manufacturers to be more competitive. But from what I've read, some of our country's smartest economists say that that's just not how it works. And that's because there are very few alternative suppliers for many of the products that we use in the US. For example, in regards to vaping, circuit boards, switches, and wiring. What this could mean is that our choice might not be between a Chinese product or an American product. Our only choice might be paying either a higher price for a Chinese product or not buying one at all, because that product won't exist anywhere else. And these costs will very likely pass on to the consumer. So this tariff could actually make vaping a lot more expensive. All right, so I decided to talk about areas that I haven't really heard anyone talking about. Most people are generalizing that because Trump, a Republican, is in the office, that he will have Republican views on issues, which are most likely to benefit the vape industry. This might be true, but we should also consider that prior to Trump running for president, he was not a right-wing Republican. Trump has actually supported many of the initiatives that Hillary Clinton supported, and he's donated to Hillary's campaigns since 2002, and he's donated to the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. And if you've been paying attention at all to the news in the past week, a lot of his stances that he was talking about on the campaign trail have changed. For example, on healthcare. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that Trump is very unpredictable right now, and we have no idea what's going to happen. But if Trump does what he said he would do while on the campaign trail, things look mostly favorable for the vaping industry. Okay, now, while we're on the topic of the election results, I want to provide an update on the ballot measures that would have affected vaping in 4 states, which was California, Colorado, Missouri, and North Dakota. So California, they had Prop 56, which would increase taxes on tobacco products by nearly 70%. Unfortunately, this one passed by a landslide, with about 63% of people voting yes. This really sucks for California because not only is it going to make vaping way more expensive in that state, but it's likely to lead former smokers back to cheaper cigarettes, and also put a lot of vape shops out of business. The next one, North Dakota, they had initiated Statutory Measure 4, which would increase taxes by 56% for wholesale, resulting in an estimated 400% increase on the final cost of vaping products for consumers. In contrast to California, 61% of voters overwhelmingly voted no on this one. So good for North Dakota residents. And Colorado, they had Amendment 72, which would triple the excise tax on tobacco and increase the wholesale tax by 62%. It didn't include electronic cigarettes, but it was vague enough to apply to vaping in the future. Fortunately for Colorado, the majority vote was no at 53%. And lastly, Missouri, they had Proposition A, which would increase state taxes on tobacco by 5%. Again, voters chose not to increase taxes. 55% of voters said no. So very good for everyone except for California. All right, now let's talk about some new products. So one that I've been seeing people talking about lately is the M-Turk RDA. It looks like a really nice RDA, but the 510 pin is made of very thin copper, something to keep in mind for anyone considering it. So Vape and Fagan, he posted a picture on Instagram about this, and it caused a little bit of drama. And the picture that Mark posted was of the 510 pin broken. So he said that he wasn't even being rough with it, but it still snapped. And if you take a look at the 510 pin, you can see why. It's extremely thin. It's about as thin as the post screw. That probably wouldn't be a problem with other types of metals, but they're using copper, which is a soft metal. They probably should have used bigger screws for the 510. But something worth noting here is that VapeAmp, who created this, stands by their products, and they appear to honor their warranty. They were very professional about responding to Mark Fagan's Instagram picture of the broken product, and they sent him a replacement pretty quick. So yeah, something I wanted to mention, because that 510 pin, it's pretty thin, and there's a good chance it would break, unfortunately, and that is a little bit of an expensive RDA. It's $90 for the black version and $95 for the red and black version. So yeah, just something to keep in mind if you do decide to buy it. Although, like I mentioned, they do seem to be pretty good about honoring their warranty. So if it does break, they'll probably send you a replacement. All right, I want to talk about something else. This one is more relevant for vendors or manufacturers. So the FTC is currently in the process of deciding how vapor products can be marketed, and they're accepting public comments from vendors for a second time. They did this the first time in 2015, and we're seeking comments about how vendors are featuring tobacco product marketing data in community education around tobacco. Originally, they received 37 comments from health organizations like the American Heart Association and the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, government entities like the National Association of Attorneys General Tobacco Committee, and industry members like R.J. Reynolds, Altria, and Fontum. Cynthia Cabrera, a former executive director of Safada, she recently pointed out on her Twitter page that the FTC notified only big players in industry of this, but they didn't notify any of the small vape businesses, which is a major part of the industry. So it's a good thing that she caught this, because this gives smaller companies the opportunity to provide input. So the FTC is requesting comments on things like if you support data collection, if data collection is necessary for the FTC, suggestions on improving data collection, such as what they should collect, if state-by-state data collection is needed, how to minimize the burden of data collection, and sales data on things like types of products, open-close systems, rechargeable disposable devices, different types of flavors, and nicotine strengths. The document is long, and I highly recommend that any business submitting a comment read it, because it will give you some ideas on how you can comment. For example, they mentioned that R.J. Reynolds' comment recommended against differentiating products by product types, since most retail stores sell disposables and rechargeables, while vape shops sell tank products. Another example that I saw was that the Joint Public Health comment stated that one of the reasons youth and adults try e-cigarettes is because of flavors, and Reynolds and Fontum opposed collection of detailed flavor data. So if you agree or disagree with comments like that, or if you have something to add, definitely check that out and leave a comment. I don't own a vape business, so I can't offer any specific suggestions on that. I don't want to give bad advice either, so I suggest that if you're a vape shop, you should reach out to Safada or an other industry organization to get more advice. All right, now let's talk about some DIY stuff. So I came across this thread on e-liquid recipes about making a DIY e-juice mixer. What this person did was tape a prescription medicine bottle to the blade of a reciprocating saw. If you're not familiar with a reciprocating saw, it's basically a motorized saw with a blade that moves back and forth really quickly. Most reciprocating saws move at 3,000 strokes per minute, so this would obviously get a bottle shaken up pretty quickly. He shows some pictures of the freshly shaken e-juice, and you can see that the e-juice is cloudy and bubbly, so it seems to work pretty well. He used a large enough prescription bottle to hold a 30 ml e-juice bottle, and he also used professional grade duct tape called Polykin 236, but any duct tape would probably work fine. If you already own a reciprocating saw, this is a great idea. You can just use an old dull blade if you have one, or grind down the teeth or cut them off so that it's no longer sharp. Then just keep it taped up and stored away and pull it out whenever you need it. If you don't have a reciprocating saw, it probably doesn't make sense to go out and buy one just for this. Although if you're anything like me, it's a good excuse to go out and get a new tool. You can get a cheap one for around $50, or you can get a quality saw for anywhere between $100 to $300. So yeah, pretty cool idea. Okay, and then I wanted to talk about this interesting Ask Me Anything I came across on Reddit. This was with the American Chemical Society. So with flavor being such a fundamental part of vaping, I thought this topic would be really interesting to a lot of you. So there was an AMA on the R Science subreddit with the American Chemical Society about flavor chemistry. Questions were answered by Devin Peterson, who is professor of food science and technology at the Ohio State University, and Gary Reinicius, professor of food science and nutrition at the University of Minnesota. I probably totally butchered his last name. But anyway, unfortunately, it looks like they couldn't stick around to answer a lot of questions, but there were some really interesting topics discussed. So first, I want to talk about artificial and natural flavors. So they mentioned that to recreate a flavor, the same chemicals found in nature need to be used in the same quantities, or it won't taste like the natural flavor. The only difference between a natural flavor and an artificial flavor is that the artificial has fewer compounds. So for example, nature might have used 100 to 200 compounds to create the flavor, while a lab might only use 20. And one person asked them what their biggest frustrations are in the field of flavor chemistry, and Gary, he said that, I honestly see no reason to believe that natural flavorings are safer than artificial flavorings, and that the public pays much more for natural flavorings than artificial flavorings, and the cost seems such a waste. So interesting thought there. According to them, it seems like there's really no reason to spend more money on natural flavorings. Okay, and then they talked a little bit about flavor preferences. So someone asked, why do some people love the flavor of some foods, such as licorice or cilantro, while others can't stand it? So flavor preferences vary based on several reasons. Humans can vary in sensitivity to flavors due to genetics, as well as prior exposure patterns. For example, a child fed foods like fish will be more likely to grow up enjoying fish. A good example of this is in Asian cultures where they eat foods like natto, which is fermented soybeans. If you've ever had that before, you'll know that it's pretty gross, but they grew up on it, so they enjoy it. So what you're exposed to as a child influences what you like as an adult. Now, as for genetic preferences, as for the American Chemical Society's thoughts on that, they say that our genetic profiles influence our tastes in different ways, and that we don't all taste something the same way someone else does. This is just common sense, but I think something worth noting from Gary's comment is that this is something to keep in mind with wine reports, and that's exactly the same thing with e-juice reviews. And that's why when I do e-juice reviews, I try to mention particular flavors that I'm sensing, as well as how strong they are, rather than focusing only on subjective opinion. I do add my own subjective opinion to my reviews as well, but that's not all I focus on. Okay, and then the topic came up about why artificial banana doesn't taste like real banana. So there are beliefs that flavorings like banana and strawberry are based on varieties of fruits that are now extinct, which is why flavorings don't taste like the fruits that we eat today. I did a little research on this, and it shows that it's considered an urban myth, but it's not necessarily a myth. It's actually not entirely false. The Gras Michel banana, and I'm not sure I'm saying that correctly, but it's the variety of banana that went mostly extinct, although some people are still growing them, but I don't think it's commercially. But those people say that the Gras Michel bananas have an artificial flavoring taste. Also, a quote from an article on BBC about flavorings say that once upon a time, banana flavorings really did taste more like the real thing. So yeah, if you think that banana flavorings taste artificial, it could be because we don't have real bananas that taste like it anymore. And if you're wondering why cherry e-juices taste like medicine, that's because real cherries contain the main compound benzaldehyde, which smells like cherry cough drops. Some cherry flavorings, they carry more or less of this compound, creating a stronger cough drop taste. It's the other smaller compounds in cherries that distinguish between their overall flavors. And this is where e-juice makers struggle, trying to figure out the little intricacies of flavors. Something else really interesting that I found while doing some research is that black cherry artificial flavorings often have a compound called p-tolualdehyde, but it isn't actually in black cherries. But after decades of it being in black cherry flavorings, people now associate that flavor with black cherries. So pretty weird. As far as the American Chemical Society's comment on this, they said that in artificial cherry flavors, only some of the compounds that contribute to a real cherry are used to maintain the cost of the ingredient, hence the perceived flavor differences. They say that the primary reason is the complexity that might go into creating that flavor. Nature can put together very complex flavor systems that involve hundreds of compounds. Artificial flavors are never that complicated. There are different reasons why artificial flavors are simplified, one of them being that nature may use chemicals that are not legally permitted in foods because they're toxic. Nature doesn't have to live by the common legal standards that the food industry does. The second reason is that complexity adds cost, and oftentimes the company that's buying an artificial banana flavor, for example, is unwilling to pay the cost of a very complex artificial flavor. Their primary reason for using an artificial flavor is that it's 5 to 10 times cheaper than the natural product. One last thing that I found really interesting in that AMA, something called the miracle berry. So some of you might know of this, but this is the first time I've ever heard about it, but this fruit contains a substance called miraculin, which makes sour foods taste sweet. People have said that miraculin can make sour lemons taste like sweet lemonade, and beer taste like pop, or milkshakes I've even heard. And in some cases it doesn't sweeten, but it enhances flavors, for example with coffee and espressos. So how crazy is that? It looks like miraculin can't be added to e-liquids because the molecule structure will break down under heat. So you'll need to eat miracle berries before you vape. Miracle berries, they're not popular in the United States and can be hard to find, so you'll most likely need to order miracle fruit tablets online. I see Amazon sells them for a pack of 10 for $15, so not necessarily cheap, but maybe you can find them somewhere else for cheaper. I've seen some people mention that the effects of miraculin don't always work as well for vaping, but they do have strong effects when eaten with foods. So you might not have much luck, but it's still worth a shot, I think. You just pop a tablet in your mouth and vape some of your favorite flavors. Or you could even vape flavors that you don't like and see if anything has changed. The flavor bending effects of miraculin can last up to an hour, so that should be plenty of time to experiment with it. On a side note, I've heard of people using miraculin tablets to get over the effects of vapor's tongue, which is when you can no longer taste flavors that you vape due to olfactory fatigue. That's a really cool tip too. There are people who use miracle berry tablets for what's called flavor tripping parties, which sounds like a dangerous drug-fueled party, but it's really just about getting friends or family together, popping one of these tablets, and seeing how foods taste. So it sounds like a lot of fun. And it's funny because I was telling one of my coworkers about these Miracle Berry tablets, and he decided to order some. So he said he'd give me one next week, so I'll actually get to try it. So that'll be fun. All right, and then one last topic I wanted to talk about here. So Mike Vapes, he published a sponsored video on his channel of a short kung fu movie produced by iJoy. It's pretty good. It starts with the bad guys preparing to torture a woman when the hero breaks in and kicks everyone's ass. As they make their escape, henchmen try to stop him along the way, and then the hero finally finds himself facing the crime boss. The crime boss puts up a pretty good fight, but the hero breaks out his iJoy RDTA box mod and defeats him with a single blow. That's the gist of it, but you should really check it out. The fight scenes are really good, and the ending is pretty funny. I'm really impressed with how high quality this film is. iJoy did a really great job of it. Okay, so that's all I have for this week. You'll find the show notes for this episode on VapePassion.com. Just do a search for episode 42. If you want to support the show, consider donating to my Patreon page at patreon.com/VapePassion, or like I mentioned earlier, go to my website and go to my vendors page. Click a link and buy anything from one of those vendors, and that helps me too. You can follow me on Twitter at VapePassion. I'm also on Facebook. If you like this weekly show, please consider giving me a thumbs up on the video and subscribe to my channel if you aren't already a subscriber. You can also subscribe to the podcast version of the show on either iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play. If you'd like to get notifications of new reviews or of this show, you can sign up to receive my weekly email on VapePassion.com. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email me anytime at alex@vapepassion.com. All right, I'll see you next week.